Marcus, whose perfume is this on your shirt? My voice trembled as I lifted the collar into the light. The scent was unmistakable, sweet and floral, clinging to the fabric as if mocking me. He froze in the doorway, coffee mug still in his hand. For a brief second, his eyes flickered toward me, then slid down to the floor. Evelyn, you are imagining things. I came straight home from work. The words left his mouth too smoothly, too quickly. I felt the lie settle in the room like smoke. After 40 years together, I knew the rhythm of his honesty, and this was not it. That night, he drifted into loud, careless sleep. I sat in the living room listening to the clock tick like a relentless judge. The shadows on the wall stretched long, accusing me of blindness. I pulled his jacket into my lap, fingers searching through the pockets until they landed on a folded receipt. It was from a steakhouse in Houston, dinner for two, a bottle of Cabernet, the very same wine he once bought me for our 10th anniversary, the memory of candlelight and his smile still etched in my mind. My throat closed. He had told me Dallas. He had lied again. I pressed the receipt flat on the table and stared until the numbers blurred. Betrayal does not always come with thunder. Sometimes it slips in quietly wrapped in perfume and ink. I wanted to shake him awake to demand answers, but rage anchored me to silence. Instead, I reached for his phone, left charging on the table. Marcus never liked technology. He always said he preferred phone calls to emails. But the screen glowed with a new message and my finger trembled as I opened it. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." A red heart pulsed beneath the words. The floor seemed to tilt. Dad. Who would write him that with such affection? I scrolled down desperately but found nothing. The inbox was scrubbed too clean, too empty, like someone had swept away every trace. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and covered my face with both hands. 4 decades of marriage hanging by a single thread of digital ink. Sleep never came. At dawn, Marcus entered the kitchen, yawning, muttering about an early meeting. I poured his coffee, forcing my hands not to shake. He barely looked at me, already straightening his tie and repeating the same casual lines. I wanted to ask if Houston tasted better than home, if the perfume on his shirt lingered longer than my embrace. Instead, I whispered, "Be careful," and let him walk out the door. The silence afterward was suffocating. I stood by the sink staring at the water circling the drain until resolve filled the hollow inside me. Suspicion was not enough. I needed truth. My fingers dialed a number I had not used in years. "Mrs. Johnson, do you still have the contact for that investigator you once mentioned?" She hesitated. "Evelyn, what is happening? Did Marcus do something?" "I just need the number," I replied softly, unwilling to say more. By noon, I was sitting in a corner booth of a small cafe downtown. The scent of roasted beans filled the air, but my stomach was tight with dread. A man in a plain blue shirt approached. He carried himself with quiet confidence, his eyes sharp searching. "Mrs. Carter," he said calmly, extending a hand. "I am Harris. Show me what you have." I slid an envelope across the table. Inside were the receipt, a printed screenshot of the message, and a photo of the perfume-stained collar. He studied each item with careful attention before nodding. "You suspect infidelity." The word cracked through the air. I could only nod, my throat too tight to speak. "I will follow him," Harris promised. "You will have answers soon." That night I stayed at my bakery, surrounded by the smell of rising dough. The ovens hummed, but the warmth no longer brought comfort. My phone buzzed on the counter. A message appeared. It was a photo. Marcus in his gray suit holding hands with Tanya, my daughter-in-law. They were stepping into a restaurant together, close, too close. Their smiles were secret, shared, intimate. I staggered back, bracing myself against the counter. Tanya, the woman I had welcomed into our family, the woman my son trusted with his heart. Another photo arrived within seconds. Marcus leaned toward her, lips close to her ear. Tanya laughed brightly, her red lipstick catching the light, her hand resting possessively on his. I dropped the phone. The bakery walls seemed to close in. The air was thick, heavy with betrayal. I pressed my palms against the cold counter, fighting to stay upright. The oven timer rang sharply, pulling me back. I pulled out a tray of bread, golden on the outside, but my world felt burned and black. I whispered to myself that it could not be true, that perhaps it was a mistake or some cruel illusion. But the photos were undeniable. Marcus and Tanya were no longer just husband and daughter-in-law. They were something far darker. My chest pounded, yet my mind grew frighteningly calm. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The photos replayed in my mind like a cruel film I could not pause. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus leaning close to Tanya, her laughter spilling out as if she had won some twisted prize. My stomach churned with a mix of grief and fury, but beneath it all was a steady pulse of determination. I would not let lies destroy me quietly. The next morning, I returned to the cafe where Harris had first met me. The same corner booth, the same aroma of roasted beans. My hands were wrapped around a cup of coffee I could not drink when he slid into the seat across from me. I followed him again last night. Harris said his tone even, but his eyes sharp. He placed his phone on the table and pushed it toward me. On the screen was a short video. Marcus and Tanya at a corner table in a candlelit restaurant. He lifted his glass to hers, their bodies leaning toward each other in perfect rhythm. My throat tightened. In all the years we had shared anniversaries and birthdays, I had never seen Marcus look at me that way. Adoration glowed in his eyes, not for me, but for the woman who had married our son. They left together around 11. Harris continued. He opened the car door for her like a man courting his lover. They drove toward the west side of town. I will need more time to confirm where they stayed. I forced myself to nod, though my hands trembled under the table. "Keep watching," I whispered. "Do not stop until you know everything." That night I walked through my bakery in the quiet after closing. The smell of flour and sugar usually comforted me, but now it only reminded me of how much I had built alone. Marcus had never kneaded the dough or stayed up until dawn to fill orders. That was my work, my sweat, my sacrifice. And yet he plotted behind my back with Tanya as if everything I owned was theirs to take. Close to midnight, my phone buzzed again. Harris had sent another message. My heart pounded as I opened the file. This time, it was a photo taken from a distance, grainy but clear enough. Marcus and Tanya, standing in front of a sleek hotel entrance, her arm brushing against his head bent toward hers. The second file was a short clip. From the balcony of a third-floor room, I saw Tanya rest her head on Marcus's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her waist and then, with no hesitation, kissed her. The video froze as my breath caught. A kiss. No more guessing. No more doubt. The truth was carved into the pixels before me. I pressed the phone to my chest and leaned against the bakery wall, sliding slowly down until I sat on the cool floor. My world had cracked, but the crack turned into something else. Not only heartbreak, not only fury, it was resolve. I would gather every piece of proof, every lie uncovered, and I would use it. By dawn, I returned home exhausted, but steady. Marcus stumbled into the kitchen, wearing his usual gray shirt, his eyes bleary. He muttered about an important meeting. I poured his coffee and nodded as if nothing was wrong. The mask of the loyal wife stayed firmly in place. He patted my shoulder lightly before leaving a gesture that now felt like an insult. When the door closed behind him, I picked up my phone and called Harris. "Do not just follow them," I said. "Find out what else they are planning. I need to know if this is more than betrayal of the heart." Later that evening, Harris sent me a recording. My hands shook as I pressed play. The voices were muffled but clear enough. Tanya's laugh, then her words low and eager. "Hurry up with that contract. Once it is signed, we can move the bakery into our hands. She will not suspect until it is too late." Marcus's voice followed steady, confident. "Leave it to me. Evelyn trusts me. She will not see it coming." I pressed the phone so hard against my ear it hurt. The bakery, my life's work, the empire I had built one loaf at a time, was their target. They were not only betraying me as a wife and as a mother, they wanted to strip me of everything I had created. I copied the file onto a small flash drive and labeled it with the date. My collection of evidence was growing piece by piece, like bricks in a wall I would soon make them crash into. That night I sat across from Marcus at dinner. The yellow kitchen light cast shadows across his face, making him look older, harsher. He spoke in his usual monotone about a client, about numbers I no longer cared about. I stirred my soup and smiled faintly, all the while hearing Tanya's voice echo in my head. When he left the table, his car keys glinting on the counter, my gaze lingered. The storm inside me was no longer confusion. It was direction. I would not confront him yet. Not until every lie was pinned down with proof. I cleaned the dishes slowly, each movement mechanical, my thoughts already racing ahead. There would be a time for rage, a time for justice, but not tonight. Tonight was for patience, for gathering strength. As I turned off the kitchen light and headed toward the bedroom, I looked once more at the keys resting on the counter. Soon, I thought, soon you will know what it feels like to be trapped in the truth. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. I smiled at customers in the bakery, wrapped loaves in paper, and answered questions about orders, but inside I was hollow. Every word Marcus spoke to me now sounded rehearsed, every touch calculated. I lived in the same house, ate at the same table, yet I felt as if I were watching him from behind glass. On a Thursday afternoon, Harris called. His voice was calm but urgent. "Mrs. Carter, I have something new. You need to hear this in person." We met again at the cafe, the same worn booth in the corner. He slid a small device across the table. "I recorded this last night in the parking lot of the hotel. They were not careful." I pressed play with shaking hands. Tanya's voice rang out sharper than ever. "Marcus, hurry up with those papers. Once we get the signatures, we can move the whole bakery chain under our name. That old woman will be out before she even knows what happened." My stomach turned. Old woman. That was how she saw me. I pressed the device closer to my ear as Marcus answered, his tone steady and cold. "Do not worry. Evelyn trusts me too much. She will sign whatever I put in front of her." The words cut deep, not only because of the betrayal, but because of the certainty in his voice. He had no doubt I would obey. No doubt I was blind enough to walk into his trap. Harris leaned forward. He mentioned meeting someone at a notary's office. I believe they are arranging a fraudulent contract. "I will get you the details." I nodded, unable to find my voice. For years I had worked these hands raw in the bakery. I had built every store, signed every contract, delivered bread at dawn when Marcus was still sleeping, and now he and Tanya were plotting to take it all away with a few signatures. That night at dinner, Marcus poured himself a glass of wine and spoke casually. "There are some business papers I will need you to look over this week. Complicated things, but it would help if you signed them quickly. Save me time." I raised my eyes slowly from my plate. His expression was neutral, his smile faint. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm. "Of course," I murmured. "Leave them on the counter." Inside my head, Tanya's voice echoed again. "Hurry up with those papers." I chewed my food in silence, nodding at the right moments, though every nerve in my body burned. When Marcus left the kitchen, I stood still for a long moment, staring at the untouched glass of wine before me. My husband had become a stranger, a predator, dressed in familiar clothes. I whispered to myself, "Not yet, not yet." The following morning, Harris sent me another photo. Marcus and Tanya leaving a law office near the city square. Tanya wore a beige dress and dark sunglasses, her head bent as if trying to hide. Marcus held the door for her, his hand brushing hers. They looked comfortable, too comfortable. The second photo nearly knocked the breath from me. They stood before a gleaming hotel. Tanya laughing, Marcus smiling down at her. Harris had written in his message, "They rented a room for the afternoon." I closed the phone and pressed it to my chest. A hotel room, a law office, secret papers. It was no longer suspicion or even betrayal. It was theft in progress. That evening, Marcus returned home late. His tie was loosened, his eyes red as if from drink. He dropped his keys on the counter and kissed the top of my head without meeting my eyes. "Long day," he muttered. "Clients from out of town." I smiled faintly, my voice steady. "You work so hard, Marcus. Rest now." He nodded, satisfied, and walked toward the bedroom. I waited until the door closed before I picked up his keys. My reflection in the dark kitchen window looked back at me, a woman I barely recognized. Stronger, colder ready. In the garage, the air smelled of gasoline and leather. I opened the glove compartment of his car. The tube of lubricant was still there, cap-loose residue crusted at the edge. I held it in my hand, my pulse pounding. The object was simple, but it carried the weight of his betrayal. I set it back carefully, wiping my hands with a napkin, then leaned against the cold metal of the car. My anger no longer screamed. It whispered. It planned. Back inside, I placed the keys neatly where Marcus had left them. I sat with a book in my lap, the pages open, though I could not read a word. I thought of Tanya's smug voice, of Marcus's certainty that I would sign away my life. And I thought of my bakery, warm with the smell of bread, the place that had carried me through 4 decades. I whispered into the empty room, "You will not take this from me." That night, as Marcus snored, I stayed awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Every breath he took was a reminder of the mask he wore, but I no longer felt helpless. I was gathering the pieces. Soon the mask would come off. The more evidence I gathered, the less I recognized the man who slept beside me. Marcus moved through the house with casual ease, humming, while he tied his shoes, sipping coffee, as if he had not torn the ground from under me. Each gesture felt like a performance designed to keep me silent. One evening Harris called. His voice was measured, but I caught the tension in it. "Evelyn, I believe Marcus has grown suspicious. Yesterday when I followed him, he looked back several times as if checking for a tail. And something else. The security camera outside your house was turned off. I felt a chill rush through me. That camera had been my quiet watchman recording every movement near our home. Now it was blind. Marcus was hiding something, or perhaps protecting himself from being caught. Do not worry," Harris continued. "I am still on him, but we must be careful. He is getting reckless with Tanya, but also more guarded. They may sense someone is watching." That night at dinner, Marcus asked an unusual question. "Were you home all afternoon?" His eyes searched my face as he lifted his fork. "Yes," I answered calmly. "I was at the bakery this morning. Then I came home to rest." He gave a small smile and turned back to his food, but the air felt heavy. I realized he was testing me, looking for cracks in my story, the way I was looking for cracks in his. Later, after he drifted to sleep, I lay awake in the dark. The faint glow of his phone lit the room as he clutched it against his chest. He had started keeping it close, never leaving it on the counter anymore. I knew he was hiding new messages calls that tied him closer to Tanya. At 2 a.m, his phone buzzed softly. He slipped out of bed, careful not to wake me, and walked into the living room. I followed silently, stopping just beyond the curtain. "Yes, of course," I heard him whisper. "Tomorrow will be perfect. Come over to the house. No more hotels. Evelyn has to leave town for a contract signing. She will not be back until late." Tanya's voice giggled faintly through the speaker. "That is wonderful. Finally we can relax. I will bring wine." He laughed, a sound that stabbed at me. "Yes, come early. I will be waiting." I pressed a hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. They were planning to use my house, my kitchen, my bed while I was gone. My blood boiled, but I forced myself into silence. I turned away and walked back to the bedroom, my mind already racing. In the morning, I prepared the house with quiet precision. I pulled Daniel's old recorder from a drawer, the one he had once used for college lectures. I replaced the batteries, set it on continuous record, and tucked it behind a family photo on the nightstand. The smiling faces in the picture felt like ghosts mocking me, but I pushed the frame into place, hiding the small red light. I whispered to myself, "Let them speak. Let every word betray them." By evening, I was ready. I told Marcus I had to travel to Nashville to meet a new supplier. His eyes lit with something that was not concern. He reached for my hand with feigned tenderness. "That is a big contract. Do not worry, I will take care of everything at home." I smiled and thanked him, but inside my rage burned cold. That night, I lay still pretending to sleep while Marcus scrolled through his phone in the dark. The glow painted his face in a pale light, making him look almost unfamiliar. Around midnight, he slipped out of bed again. I heard the faint sound of his voice, low and conspiratorial. Tanya laughed on the other end. I tightened my fists under the blanket. Tomorrow she would walk through my door thinking the house was theirs. Tomorrow the recorder would capture every sound, every betrayal. Before dawn, I slipped into the kitchen. I filled a skillet with oil and placed it on the stove. A thin string tied to the igniter stretched to the window attached to a heavy can on the sill. One tug would send flames licking at the pan smoke, pouring out in thick black waves. I tested it once, pulling gently. Smoke curled upward immediately. I coughed, fanned it away, and turned off the stove. The smell lingered as a warning of what was to come. When Marcus finally stirred from sleep, I was already dressed with a suitcase by the door. "I have to catch the early bus," I said. My voice was calm, steady. He yawned and kissed my cheek absent-mindedly. "Safe travels, Evelyn. Call me if you need anything." I stepped outside, closing the door softly behind me. My heart pounded, but my legs were firm. Instead of going to the station, I crossed the street to Mrs. Johnson's house. She opened the door in her robe, surprise in her eyes. "Evelyn, what are you doing here so early?" I forced a smile. "I need to sit with you for a while. I have to watch my house." She frowned but did not press. She poured me a cup of coffee and gave me a chair by the window. From there I could see my front door waiting for the moment when betrayal would step inside. The morning light spilled through Mrs. Johnson's curtains as I watched my own house across the street. The hours crawled by. At 10, a taxi pulled up in front of my door. Tanya stepped out wearing a pale floral dress, her sunglasses covering half her face. She looked around nervously before Marcus ushered her inside. My pulse pounded, but I forced myself to sit still. I slipped my headphones on and tapped the recorder app linked to the device I had hidden in the bedroom. Laughter filled my ears, followed by the clink of glasses. Then Marcus's voice, warm and eager. "No more hiding in hotels. This is better. We have the place to ourselves." Tanya's laugh followed, sharp as broken glass. "The old woman is gone, right?" "Yes," Marcus replied. "She will not be back until late." I clenched the coffee cup in my hands, fighting the urge to storm across the street. Instead, I listened as the sounds shifted the bed, creaking, Tanya's laugh turning breathless. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself, "Just a little longer, just a little longer." Suddenly, Tanya cried out, her voice laced with panic. "What is happening, Marcus? I cannot move." His voice grew frantic. "Stop talking. Wait, let me see." I smiled grimly. The trap had sprung. The superglue in the tube they thought was safe had bound them together in humiliation. I tugged gently on the string tied to the stove. The igniter sparked, the oil flared, and smoke billowed out of the kitchen window. Mrs. Johnson gasped. "Evelyn, your house is on fire!" I stood beside her, feigning shock. "Call the fire department." Neighbors spilled into their yards, shouting, pointing at the smoke. Someone cried, "Where is Evelyn?" "She left for Nashville this morning." Another voice replied, "Then who is inside?" Minutes later, the wail of a siren cut through the air. A fire truck roared down the street and stopped in front of my house. My son Darius leapt from the driver's seat, his fire chief uniform glowing under the flashing lights. My heart ached as I watched him rush forward, unaware of the truth waiting inside. He barked orders to his crew. "Get the equipment ready. There may be people trapped." I gripped Mrs. Johnson's hand tightly as tears stung my eyes. This was the moment everything would shatter. Darius swung a sledgehammer against the front door. Wood splintered. Firefighters stormed inside with hoses and axes. Through my headphones, I heard Marcus shouting in fury and Tanya sobbing. "Do something, Marcus, please, we are stuck!" "Be quiet," he roared. "Do not scream." I bit my lip until it bled. My son's voice followed, filled with disbelief. What is this?" a younger firefighter muttered. "My God!" Another choked back a nervous laugh until Darius snapped. Silence. The truth was out. My son had seen his father and his wife in the most shameful embrace imaginable. A firefighter rushed outside. "Chief, the smoke is under control. Just a small oil fire. Nothing serious." But Darius did not answer. I knew he was still standing in that bedroom, frozen by betrayal. Neighbors pressed closer to the house, whispering, pointing. "It is Marcus and Tanya." Someone gasped. "Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Unbelievable." The firefighters carried them out wrapped in thin sheets, their bodies awkward, and bound, their faces pale with shame. Tanya sobbed loudly. "It burns. Please help me." Marcus growled through clenched teeth. "Do not let them see us." But the entire neighborhood had already seen. Phones were lifted, cameras flashing, murmurs rose into a storm. Disgraceful. Poor Evelyn. How could they do this to their family? I stepped into the crowd, pretending to arrive breathless, as if I had just returned from the bus station. People turned to me with pity, some with anger on my behalf. I kept my face calm, though my heart cracked at the sight of Darius standing motionless in the yard, his arms hanging, his face white as ash. The ambulance wailed as it pulled away with Marcus and Tanya inside. Laughter mixed with disgust followed them down the street. What a show. Shameless people. God help Evelyn. I stood beside Mrs. Johnson as the crowd slowly dispersed. My son avoided my eyes, his shoulders heavy with shame he had not earned. I longed to hold him, to shield him, but the moment was not right. He needed to walk through the fire of truth on his own. Hours later at the hospital, I walked down a corridor filled with murmurs. Nurses whispered. Patients peeked from their rooms. Everyone had already seen the video circulating online. The scandal was no longer confined to our street. It was everywhere. When I entered the ward, Marcus and Tanya lay in separate beds, their faces pale, their eyes refusing to meet mine. Marcus opened his mouth as if to explain, but no words came. Tanya wept quietly, her shoulders shaking. I set my purse on the table and placed 2 tubes of ointment beside them, smiling faintly. "For the burns," I said softly. They stared at me, guilt and humiliation thick in the air. I turned and walked out before their cries began. The hallway filled with Tanya's screams. "It burns! It burns!" Marcus cursed loudly. Nurses rushed past me carrying trays of supplies. Someone muttered, "It is them, the father-in-law and the daughter-in-law from the video." Another voice answered, "They deserve it." I kept walking, my heels steady on the tile floor. My heart was heavy, but my spirit felt lighter. For the first time in years, I was not the one carrying shame. The chaos of the hospital still echoed in my ears as I sat alone that night in the bakery office. Papers were scattered across the desk, invoices mixed with receipts, but my eyes could not focus. I heard Tanya's screams in the hallway, Marcus cursing in anger, the whispers of strangers judging them. The memory should have brought me satisfaction, yet what I felt was heavier. I had shown them shame, but they were not finished. They still had their plans, and they would not stop until I stopped them. The next morning, Marcus returned home with bandages wrapped around his arms. He moved stiffly, muttering about pain, but his eyes still carried arrogance. The doctors said it was just a reaction. He lied, as if the whole town had not already seen what happened. He kissed my cheek and pretended nothing had changed. I forced a smile, my voice steady. "You should rest." He nodded and collapsed onto the couch, leaving his phone on the counter. For a moment, I considered picking it up, but then I saw the screen flash with Tanya's name. He snatched it quickly, turning his back to me. My stomach twisted, but I kept my mask in place. Later that evening, Harris sent me another message. The photo showed Marcus and Tanya in his car, a thick stack of papers spread between them. Tanya held a red pen circling lines with determination. Marcus leaned close, nodding as if every word belonged to him. Harris wrote beneath the image, "They plan to use a contact at the notary's office to transfer your business." My breath caught. It was worse than I had imagined. They were not only reckless in their affair, they were methodical in their theft. Every moment I waited gave them more ground. That night I walked through the quiet house after Marcus had fallen asleep. His car keys glinted on the nightstand. I picked them up, my hand trembling only once. The garage was dark, the faint smell of gasoline filling the air. I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the tube of lubricant. It felt cold in my hand, a symbol of everything they had done. I carried it into the kitchen. The lemon soap on my counter smelled clean sharp, a contrast to the filth in my palm. I scrubbed my hands, then opened the drawer and found a tube of industrial superglue. My heart pounded as I filled the lubricant container drop by drop. The mixture looked the same, smooth and convincing. At a glance, no one would suspect. I twisted the cap shut and held it up to the light. It was ready. I placed the tube back in the glove compartment exactly where I had found it, adjusted the seat and mat, and closed the door. My reflection in the window stared back at me. I whispered, "This is not revenge. This is justice." Back inside, I slipped the keys onto the nightstand and sat in the living room with a book open in my lap. The words on the page blurred, unreadable. I listened to Marcus snore, my mind racing with plans. Tomorrow I would set the next trap. When dawn came, I prepared breakfast as usual. Marcus sat at the table sipping his coffee. I set a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. Then I spoke carefully. "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract with a new supplier. It might take all day. Can you manage dinner alone?" He looked up, his eyes brightening with relief he tried to hide. "A big contract?" he asked, reaching for my hand. "Do not worry. Go ahead. I will handle everything." The small smile on his lips pierced me deeper than any blade. He wanted me gone. He was already imagining Tanya walking through the door. I forced myself to nod. "Thank you. I will call if I get back late." He kissed my hand and returned to his coffee. The performance was flawless, but I knew the truth. Later that night, I lay in bed, my back turned toward him. He whispered, "Rest well, Evelyn. Tomorrow will be busy." I closed my eyes, steadying my breath until his snores filled the room. Then I slipped quietly into the kitchen. The skillet sat ready on the stove. I poured oil into it until the surface gleamed. I tied a thin string to the igniter and stretched it to the window, securing it with a heavy coffee can. I tested it once. The flame caught instantly, smoke curling upward. I waved it away, quickly satisfied. Tomorrow the smoke would bring the neighbors running. Tomorrow the mask would fall completely. At dawn, I stood by the door with my suitcase. Marcus rubbed his eyes, yawning. "You are leaving early?" "Yes," I replied softly. "The bus leaves soon." He kissed my cheek and smiled. "Safe trip, Evelyn." I stepped outside, my heart pounding. Instead of heading to the station, I crossed the street to Mrs. Johnson's house. She opened the door. Surprise etched across her face. "Evelyn, what is wrong? Why are you here with a suitcase?" I forced a smile and whispered, "I just need to sit here for a while. I need to watch my house." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded and guided me inside. She poured me coffee and placed a chair by the window. From there, I could see my front door waiting. The stage was set, and the actors were about to walk on. From Mrs. Johnson's window, I watched the minutes crawl like hours. The house across the street looked calm, its curtains drawn its walls, hiding the betrayal I knew was unfolding inside. The headphones pressed against my ears carried every sound from the recorder I had hidden. At first there was laughter, the clinking of glasses, then Marcus's voice warm with eagerness. No more hiding in hotels. This is our space now. Tanya's voice followed, mocking, triumphant. The old woman is gone, right? Yes, Marcus said with certainty. She will not be back until late tonight. The sound of the bed creaking filled my ears. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, Hold on, Evelyn. Just a little longer. Suddenly, Tanya's voice broke into panic. Marcus, something is wrong. I cannot move. His reply was harsh, desperate. Stop talking. Do not scream. Let me fix it. I smiled grimly. The trap had closed. The superglue in the tube they trusted had sealed them in a prison of their own making. My hands tightened around the string attached to the stove. With a swift pull, the igniter sparked flames, leapt to life, and thick black smoke rose from the skillet. It curled through the kitchen window in dark spirals. Mrs. Johnson gasped beside me. Evelyn, your house is on fire. I pressed my hand to my chest, feigning alarm. Call the fire department quickly. Neighbors rushed into their yards, pointing at the smoke. Voices rose in confusion. Where is Evelyn? I thought she went to Nashville. Another answered. Then who is inside the house? The siren of the fire truck wailed in the distance, growing louder until the red vehicle screeched to a stop in front of my house. My son Darius leapt out, commanding his crew with authority. His uniform gleamed under the flashing lights, his face set with determination. Get the hoses ready, he shouted. There may be people trapped. My throat tightened as I watched him lead his men toward the door. The sound of the sledgehammer striking the frame echoed down the street. Wood splintered and the door burst open. Firefighters stormed inside. Through my headphones I heard Marcus shouting, his voice ragged with fear. Help us! We are stuck! Tanya sobbed uncontrollably. Please, please do something. Then I heard Darius's voice filled with disbelief. What is this? What have you done? A younger firefighter whispered. My God! Another stifled a nervous laugh until Darius barked, Silence. I pressed the headphones tighter, tears welling in my eyes. My son had seen it, the truth laid bare. His father and his wife bound together in disgrace. A firefighter emerged from the house, calling to the crowd, The fire is under control. It was only a small blaze in the kitchen, but his words did not quiet the whispers rising among the neighbors. Phones appeared in hands, cameras recording voices spreading the news. It is Marcus and Tanya, father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Unbelievable. Two firefighters carried Marcus and Tanya out wrapped in thin sheets. Their bodies awkwardly joined, their faces twisted in shame. Tanya cried out, It burns. Please help me. Marcus groaned, Do not let them see us. But the whole neighborhood had already seen. Murmurs turned into outrage. Disgusting. Poor Evelyn. How could they do this to their own family? I stepped into the crowd, pretending to arrive breathless, as though I had just returned from the bus station. People turned toward me with pity, some with anger on my behalf. I kept my face calm, though inside my heart broke at the sight of Darius standing motionless in the yard. His arms hung at his sides, his eyes hollow. The ambulance doors slammed shut, the siren wailed, and Marcus and Tanya were driven away. Neighbors shook their heads, their voices sharp, shameless. God help Evelyn. I stood beside Mrs. Johnson as the crowd slowly dispersed. My son avoided my gaze, his shoulders heavy with the weight of betrayal he had not deserved. I longed to hold him, but the time was not right. He needed space to carry his own pain. The video spread quickly. By the time I reached the hospital later that day, whispers filled every hallway. Nurses spoke in hushed voices. Patients leaned out of their rooms. The scandal was no longer private. It had become a spectacle for the whole town. When I stepped into the ward, Marcus and Tanya lay in separate beds, their eyes darting away from mine. Marcus tried to speak, but his lips only trembled. Tanya covered her face with her hands, tears soaking her pillow. I set my purse on the table and placed 2 tubes of ointment beside them, my expression calm. For the burns, I said softly. Their eyes widened, shame and fear mingling. Without another word, I turned and walked out, their cries rising behind me. The hallway filled with Tanya's screams. It burns. Help me. Marcus cursed in pain. Nurses rushed past carrying trays of supplies. Strangers shook their heads as they whispered, "It is them." The scandalous pair from the video. Another voice answered, "They deserve every bit of it." I walked steadily down the corridor, my heels clicking against the tile. For years I had carried the weight of betrayal in silence. Now the burden rested where it belonged, on the shoulders of those who had earned it. The hospital corridors buzzed with whispers that seemed to follow me wherever I walked. Even without names spoken, everyone knew the story. Nurses glanced in my direction. Patients leaned out of their rooms. Visitors murmured behind their hands. The video had traveled faster than fire itself. My family's disgrace was now the town's spectacle. When I entered the ward again, Marcus shifted on his bed, his eyes refusing to meet mine. Tanya lay curled on her side, tears streaking her cheeks. A nurse adjusted their IV lines and gave me a sympathetic look before leaving the room. Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and strained. "Evelyn, I can explain." I raised my hand to silence him. "No, I do not need explanations. I need truth, and I already have it." Tanya whimpered, clutching the sheet to her chest. "Please forgive me. It was a mistake." Her words rang hollow. She had laughed in Marcus's ear, mocked me as an old woman plotted to take my bakery. There was no mistake. There was intention. I turned away before my rage erupted and left the ward. In the hallway, Harris was waiting. He handed me a folder thick with documents and photographs. They met with a notary last week. They prepared transfer papers for the bakery chain. If you had signed, you would have lost everything. I took the folder in trembling hands. "Thank you. Keep watching them. I want every detail." He nodded. "Be careful, Mrs. Carter. They are desperate now." That night I sat in my bakery office with the folder open before me. Page after page showed proof of their conspiracy. Contracts, receipts, emails all tied together in Harris's neat handwriting. My chest ached as I thought of the years I had poured into this business. Every loaf, every sleepless night, every delivery at dawn. All of it nearly stolen with a few forged signatures. My phone buzzed on his desk. It was a message from a hotel manager. "We regret to inform you that due to recent publicity surrounding your family, we must suspend our order until the situation is resolved." My heart dropped. Their scandal was bleeding into my livelihood. Customers had supported me through whispers, but businesses cared about reputation. I placed the phone down slowly and whispered, "You will not take this too." The following morning I returned to the hospital. Marcus was sitting upright, a bandage on his arm, his expression carefully composed. Tanya kept her face turned toward the wall. I set a large envelope on the bedside table. Inside are divorce papers. "You will sign them, Marcus. This marriage ends here." His mouth fell open. "Evelyn, please, we can fix this." I looked him straight in the eye. 40 years of marriage end today. You chose your path. I am choosing mine. Tanya reached for me, her voice breaking. "Evelyn, I am sorry. Please talk to Darius for me. Tell him I love him." The mention of my son's name stung. "Do not speak his name," I said coldly. "You destroyed him." A nurse entered and glanced at the envelope on the table, then at my face. She said nothing, but her eyes told me she understood. Later that afternoon, I met with a lawyer downtown. He reviewed Harris's folder carefully. "This is strong evidence," he said. "We can file for a protective order on your bakery assets immediately. Their attempt to transfer ownership will collapse." Relief washed over me, though it was tinged with sorrow. I signed the papers with a steady hand, sealing the decision that would protect my life's work. By evening, the scandal had spread beyond the neighborhood. Local news outlets picked up the video. Headlines flashed across screens. Fire chief's father caught in affair with daughter-in-law. The bakery that had once been known for sweet pastries was now linked with betrayal. Customers still lined up offering sympathy, but the sting of shame lingered. Mrs. Johnson stopped by with a basket of fruit. "You are stronger than all of them," she said firmly. "The whole neighborhood knows you fought for what is yours." I hugged her, holding back tears. "I have to stay strong for Darius." That night, Darius came home late. He placed his helmet on the counter, his eyes weary. "Mom, I do not know how to face the station tomorrow. Everyone saw." I took his hand. "You do not carry their shame. You carry mine, and I am proud of you." He lowered his head, silent tears slipping down his cheeks. I pulled him into an embrace, both of us trembling under the weight of what we had lost. As I prepared for bed, I opened the dresser drawer and checked the evidence again. Photos, videos, recordings, each one a nail in the coffin of their lies. Tomorrow I would deliver everything to the court. Tomorrow Marcus and Tanya would face the consequences not only of their betrayal, but of their attempt to steal what was mine. I closed the folder, set it on the nightstand, and whispered into the darkness, "You wanted everything. Now you will have nothing." The papers waited in my purse like a silent weapon. Divorce papers notarized and final. As I walked through the hospital corridor, my heels clicking against the tile, I felt every step bringing me closer to an ending I once thought I would never face. 40 years of marriage were about to be sealed with a pen. When I entered the ward, Marcus was propped up on his pillows. Tanya sat upright too, her eyes swollen from crying. Both turned toward me with the same look, a mixture of fear and pleading. I set the envelope on the table between their beds. "This is over," I said quietly. "Sign it." Marcus reached for my hand, his eyes watery. "Evelyn, please listen to me. I made mistakes, but we can rebuild. We can put this behind us." My chest tightened, but I kept my voice firm. "You betrayed me. You betrayed our son. You tried to steal the bakery that I built with my own hands. There is no rebuilding, only endings." Tanya leaned forward, her voice trembling. "Please forgive me. Tell Darius I was weak, that I still love him. Give me one chance." I turned to her with cold eyes. "Do not say his name. He gave you his trust, and you shattered it." The room was silent, except for the beep of machines. Marcus picked up the pen with a shaking hand. His signature scratched across the page. Tanya wept softly, covering her face. I took the papers back and slipped them into my purse. A chapter of my life closed with the sound of paper rustling. That afternoon I met with my lawyer again. He reviewed the signed documents and nodded. "The divorce will proceed without contest. As for the bakery, the protective order has been filed. They can no longer touch your assets." I exhaled slowly, the weight in my chest lifting just enough to breathe again. When I returned home, Darius was waiting at the table. His face was pale, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "Did he sign?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I answered. "It is done." He leaned back in his chair, his shoulders sagging. For a long time neither of us spoke. Then he said, "Tanya sent me a message. She begged me to come see her." I studied his face, the pain etched deep. "And will you?" He shook his head. "No, I cannot. I saw her with my own eyes. I heard her voice. There is nothing left to say." I reached across the table and held his hand. "You are stronger than I ever imagined." That evening, news spread quickly. The hospital had leaked the story, and local stations reported that Marcus Carter and his daughter-in-law had been caught in an affair. People in town shook their heads in disbelief. Some whispered with pity for me, others with anger for Darius. But no one defended Marcus and Tanya. Their names were dragged through the mud, their reputations shattered. The bakery became a refuge once more. Customers came not only for bread, but to offer words of support. One woman said, "Evelyn, we are proud of you. You stood tall while others crumbled." I smiled faintly, though my heart still ached. At night, I walked through the empty bakery, the ovens cooling, the scent of flour lingering. I thought of the years when Marcus used to sit at the counter pretending to help, when Tanya once asked me to teach her family recipes. All those memories now felt poisoned, twisted into lies. Darius moved into the spare room, his suitcase by the door, his uniform hanging on the chair. He rose early each morning, heading to the fire station with silent determination. At dinner, he ate in silence, but slowly, as the days passed, he began to talk again. "Mom," he said one evening, "I had to command a crew today at a warehouse fire. It was dangerous, but we saved everyone. It felt good to be useful again." I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. "You are more than useful. You are brave." He looked at me, his eyes softening for the first time in weeks. "I will stay with you, Mom. We will run the bakery together. You will not have to carry it alone." Tears stung my eyes. For all that I had lost, I still had him. That truth was enough to keep me standing. Weeks later, I stood outside the courthouse with my lawyer as the judge signed the final decree. The marriage of Evelyn and Marcus Carter was dissolved. My bakery was declared untouchable, safe under my ownership. The sun shone brightly, yet I felt a chill. Freedom came at the cost of everything I once believed in. I walked out of the building and saw Darius waiting by the steps. He opened his arms and I stepped into his embrace. For the first time in months, I felt whole, even if only in fragments. As we drove home, I looked out the window at the passing streets. Neighbors waved, some whispered, but I no longer cared. The scandal belonged to Marcus and Tanya. My life was my own again. At the bakery door, I paused, inhaling the warm scent of fresh bread drifting through the air. My home, my work, my legacy. They had tried to take it, but I had won it back. I whispered to myself as I stepped inside, "You thought you could destroy me, but I am still here." The first weeks after the divorce were quiet, almost too quiet. The house that once echoed with Marcus's footsteps now felt larger, emptier, yet calmer. I no longer had to pretend at the breakfast table or hide my trembling hands when his phone lit up with Tanya's name. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was healing. Darius kept his promise and moved into the spare room. Each morning we unlocked the bakery together, the scent of yeast and sugar filling the air as the ovens warmed. He carried trays of bread with the strength of a firefighter and handled customers with the calm authority of a man who had faced flames. Watching him work beside me was both comfort and sorrow. He had lost a wife and a father on the same day, yet here he was steady and present. One evening as we prepared dough, he looked at me with a faint smile. "Mom, we should make changes. Safer ovens, new wiring alarms. The station can help with inspections." I nodded, realizing that he was not only protecting me, but channeling his pain into purpose. "Then let us do it together," I said. And so we began. Within weeks, the bakery transformed. Fire extinguishers gleamed on every wall. New alarms chimed during tests. Darius organized a community event called Fire Safe Bakery Day. Families gathered to learn safety drills while tasting sweet bread. Children laughed as he showed them how to use hoses. For the first time in months, joy returned to our walls. Customers who once whispered about scandal now praised resilience. A woman approached me at the counter. "Evelyn, your strength inspires us. You faced betrayal, and yet you built something even stronger." I smiled softly. "I had help," I said, glancing at Darius. Church became my refuge on Sundays. Stained glass light fell across my face as I sat in the pews praying not for revenge, but for peace. I asked for strength for Darius, for clarity to guide us forward. Sometimes I closed my eyes and let the choir's voices wash away the memory of Marcus's lies and Tanya's laughter. Mrs. Johnson often walked with me in the town square. She spoke of neighborhood gossip, of new families moving in, of the way people still talked about the scandal. "But you," she said one evening, her eyes warm, "you are the one who won. You stood tall when others would have fallen." I thanked her, though I knew victory carried scars. At night, I still dreamed of the night Darius burst into that smoke-filled bedroom, his face frozen in horror. Some wounds do not fade quickly, but each morning the smell of bread rising reminded me that life moves forward. One Saturday, Darius asked for flan, the dessert I had once taught Tanya to make. His request startled me, but his smile was gentle. "It is my favorite, Mom. Will you make it again?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady, "but you will stir the caramel." He laughed softly, the first true laugh I had heard from him in months. That sound healed me more than any prayer. Seasons shifted. Leaves turned gold outside the bakery windows. Business flourished again. Hotels renewed their contracts. New customers arrived, drawn by both the taste of our bread and the story of survival whispered through town. The scandal that once threatened to ruin me had become the fire that forged me stronger. One evening after closing, I sat with Darius at the small kitchen table. The day's earnings lay stacked neatly between us. He reached across the table and took my hand. "We lost so much, Mom, but we still have each other, and maybe that is enough." I squeezed his hand, tears filling my eyes. "It is more than enough. It is everything." Outside the town grew quiet, the street lamps glowing softly. I thought of Marcus and Tanya, their names spoken only in whispers, now their faces marked forever by shame. I did not hate them anymore. Hatred had no place in my new life. What remained was resolved dignity and the unshakable bond between mother and son. I looked at the ovens cooling in the bakery, at the shelves lined with bread ready for morning, and felt peace. Betrayal had not destroyed me. It had revealed my strength. And as I prepared for bed that night, I whispered a prayer into the darkness. Not for revenge, not for justice, but for gratitude. Gratitude that I was still standing, that my bakery still thrived, and that Darius still sat at my table. True strength is not measured by what we lose, but by how we rise from the ashes. Evelyn learned that betrayal can wound deeply, yet dignity heals. In every ending lies the seed of renewal, and sometimes survival means choosing self-respect over bitterness.